Welcome back to The Conscious Entrepreneur. Today, we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, which is crucial for creating a truly inclusive and thriving workplace. My guest is Ericka Hines, the founder of Black Women Thriving. With over 14 years of experience, Ericka has trained more than 10,000 individuals, helping organizations transform their DEI commitments into actionable, impactful strategies. Ericka is also the driving force behind the Black Women Thriving Report, a comprehensive study that explores the unique challenges faced by Black women in the workplace and provides actionable recommendations for creating environments where they can truly thrive. In our conversation today, Ericka shares her journey into DEI work, the motivations behind her groundbreaking report, and practical advice for entrepreneurs looking to embed DEI principles into their business from the very start. We explore the importance of going beyond traditional DEI training to effect real cultural and structural change, discussing the concept of thriving versus merely surviving, and the critical role of leadership in driving these efforts. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Ericka Hines. Hey, Ericka, great to see you. Welcome to the Conscious Entrepreneur Podcast.
Alex, thank you. So good to meet you. Thank you for asking me to come on.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. I've been thinking about, and we have lots of conversations at the Conscious Entrepreneur Summit about the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And I got to tell you, I realize I have a lot to learn on these topics. So I'm really excited to bring you on the show to hear your perspective on why DEI matters and how it's impacted you personally and professionally, or how this work has impacted you personally and professionally. So, because it's a big deal for our audience to understand, hey, how can we support these causes? How can we contribute to a more inclusive environment? And so I'm really looking forward to your insights. For us to just kick things off here, I'd love to hear, how did you decide, or what was the deciding moment when you said, you know what, I'm going to go all in on this career of DEI. I'm going to make this my calling.
Yeah, that's a good question. So when I started out almost 14 years ago, 2010, on this entrepreneurial journey of my own, I did not set out to do DEI work. At the time, it was diversity and inclusion. Equity had not entered the scene yet. But pragmatically, actually, that's where I started getting clients, was doing that work. And so I was, my initial approach to it was perhaps the one that I now caution my own clients against, where I was like, everybody's doing it, everybody thinks about it, or that I don't feel like there's anything new. And I began to dig deeper into kind of what was like the sort of prevailing concepts in the area, and I became interested, and I was like, okay. So it was really a combination of like kind of intellectual interest, but also getting client work. And I sort of went all in probably about 3 to 4, 5 years later, when I was like, I think I'm good at this. And I think I have something that I can contribute. And it became more of an embodiment than just like a job or a business.
Got it. Okay, great. So this became your practice. And what were you doing before this became your practice, or before you were doing it full time on your own?
Yeah. So before then, I was, I had a number of different jobs. My like most immediate past job was I was doing training and development for a national nonprofit that works with lawyers. I have a legal background. And I was doing that. I've always, throughout my career, like since law school, have had a social change, social justice bent in terms of like work that I'm interested in and work that I wanted to do. So if I look back at the entirety of my life, this is not surprising that I've landed where I've landed.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, one of the pieces of work that you have put out is this really interesting and very comprehensive report, called Black Women Thriving. And this is a really rigorous view on everything that's going on in the world of work. And there's some fascinating stuff in here. And the main premise of it is, we don't want to be accepting the status quo. We want to be questioning the assumptions that we have, and that Black women deserve to be thriving at work, not just always in survival mindset. This is a really, really big piece of research and study. I don't know how many pages it is, but it's a lot of pages, 50 pages or something like that.
Yes.
What was the motivation behind putting this together and really starting to codify this level of research in this area?
Ideologically, there was like an ideological and actually a very like practical reason,
Okay.
which speaking to entrepreneurs, I think they'll appreciate. So ideologically, I wanted to, in my work of doing DEI, I had noticed over the years that even though I was doing like out here in organizations trying to make them more diverse and inclusive and equitable, I would often see that Black women in the work that I was doing, even like very specifically in trainings, were like very withdrawn and removed, and would tell me in one-on-one conversation or small group conversations that they would have with me, like, this isn't working for me. I don't necessarily believe that this will work. And, they gave lots of reasons why. And so that sort of like stayed in the middle of my brain. Another reason, so that was a strong reason, but almost just as strong was this idea of, at least and I'll say in the American Black community, was this idea of like, if you're successful, you'll be happy. And I think that might span across,
If you're successful,
race.
you'll be happy. Uh-huh.
If you have success, you'll be happy. And what I saw was, I just was noticing like the fact that when anecdotally, there would be Black women who had success and were dying by suicide, to be very honest. And I was like, I don't know that this message of
Not working.
attaining workplace success is the end all be all. So
Right.
I want to nudge at that. I want to nudge and push at that. So yeah, those were the two big reasons. And then practically, I wanted to have a piece of intellectual property.
Right. So something you could refer back to, something that's your own, something that you're putting your stamp out there for, that says, here's what we did, here's our body of research on this one particular topic. So tell us about how it went into, what went into building this. I thought it was thousands of participants you had in the research. But walk us through kind of what that whole process was.
Okay. All right. So this is definitely a situation of like being at the time a very small team of 2, but expanding to a team of 20, through vendors and contractors.
Uh-huh.
I'll kind of say that the process included, we actually had to do marketing prior to the survey to really start to get people interested.
Okay.
It included, building the survey, having an academic partner, because what was very important to me is that, as you said, I think you said like rigorous, deep, like it was very important to me that there would be no question about its like validity.
Mm-hmm.
So, really trying to find someone who, and I found a wonderful partner in Dr. Mako Fitzward at Arizona State University, and building the survey, recruiting people to take the survey. I mean, that really was the marketing campaign. I knew someone. I think we asked someone like, "What's a number? What's the number that we have to reach for it to be like for people to like, in public opinion, see it as valid?" It's actually a much smaller number in terms of like what makes it valid, but public opinion is around 1,000. So I was like, we have to get 1,000.
End of 1,000 is a big number. That's a big number for this type of work.
It is. And 1,000 from essentially what is like a tiny boutique firm, and I use boutique as in small. So survey, hours of analysis, writing of the report, releasing the report. There was like marketing, communications, like that's the one thing I tell people when they talk to me, like, oh, what did you do? I was like, do not underestimate the importance of communication from the start all the way through like release and into like beyond release, like trying to get it out there into the press. So that's my very short answer. I could go really down into the deep depths, but yeah.
I mean, I noticed this because I know as an entrepreneur what it takes to put this type of thing together when you have this kind of big deal landmark work, and it's a super well done PDF, very professional. It's got all the graphics and all the like really nice design to it. And I know it's a really big deal to put these together. And then you do all this. You've got 1,400 people who are you're reporting back on from the data, and you've got all these major points. Did this have the impact that you were hoping it was going to have?
It did. And it's interesting because I learned that you actually really can't control the type of impact that it has. Meaning, there were data points in the report that I was like, oh, this is the one, this is the one, and that's not the one that is like out there in the sort of world that people refer back to. It's a whole other data point that people are like, this, I've never seen this before. So that's a really great question, because last year I did have a moment where I was like, I said from the beginning, I really care about having impact. I no longer doubt the impact, when you see it, not just in the press, but when you see folks quoting it back to you and you're going like, wait, that's from my work.
Wait, I wrote that. That's me.
Exactly. I was like, yes, we've had some impact. I think we've like put a dent into some conversations.
Mm-hmm. Now, the report spends a lot of time talking about thriving, and a question that I've got is, what do we mean? How do we define thriving? And is thriving the same thing as DEI and belonging? What are we looking at here? What are the distinctions, and how do we start to think about these concepts?
Yeah. So, number one, I would say thriving is not the same thing as DEI and belonging, but I do think that it is if you were to look at this as like, I'm going to use timeline. That's not the right word, but if you were to look at like benchmarks, I think thriving would be after inclusion. So it would be like diversity. We're trying to achieve a diversity. We're trying to achieve inclusion. We're trying to achieve thriving, and we're trying to achieve equity. Going back to your question around what does thriving mean, I was very insistent that we actually have an operational definition. And in the report, we do have one that is not my own. It came from, psychologist at the University of Michigan, so I was like, it felt very important to me, one, because I wanted something to hang our hat on, to go, this is what we're trying to achieve. And also when I thought about, well, what can we do to change it? It was like, I can operationalize this definition. If I have something to hang on to, I can figure out how to get to that.
Mm-hmm. And so the definition is the psychological state in which individuals experience both a sense of vitality and a sense of learning at work.
Yes.
So that's what we're going for.
Well, if we're talking about thriving at work, yes.
Got it. Yeah.
Now, how does that fit into DEI? I'll just like quickly let me talk about that.
Yeah.
Which is, there can be what stands in the way of the path to having feeling a sense of vitality, feeling a sense of learning. I think those impediments some of them can be general, and I think people, everyone at work experiences them. I also think that there are unique workplace stressors that Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and anyone who's like outside of kind of the majority, in any other identities, those are additional stressors that I think impact feeling that sense of vitality. So, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. But tell me more. Give me some examples of those specific stressors.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that that's where the work of the report comes in, where we talk about I think I referenced like, what is that? The data point that has been featured all across everywhere is the data point that talks about 88% of Black women essentially say that they experience burnout.
Mm-hmm.
The reasons given underneath that in the report, things are like not understanding, like necessarily not being given sort of like clear guidance, and not having and I can't sort of like quote these off the top of my head, but feeling like they don't have enough work-life balance. I think there's also the fact that they talk about a little later on in another part, talking about, well, feeling as though they can't necessarily talk about aspects of their identity at work. Feeling as though, Black women feeling as though they have to code switch. So code switching is like, I'm going to change the way that I talk. I'm going to change necessarily the way that I dress and appear, in order to fit in. It's also, there's another piece that we wrote it, like, I think we just mentioned the word, but it's like folks feeling as though I just have to agree with everything that's happening at work because it is easier to go along, to get along.
Yeah.
Again, which many people may feel, but when we are experiencing like racism and sexism, and not feeling as though you can't bring those up, that has adverse mental and physical impact.
Oh, for sure. For sure. I mean, first of all, 88% is like an unfathomably large number.
Yes.
That's the vast majority. You're citing in this research that, some of the contributing factors to this, in addition to what you just mentioned, some of the contributing factors to 88% of Black women feeling burnout are things like lack of personal time, unclear job expectations, which probably just means more stress because stuff's getting thrown at you all the time. Almost 60% are saying negative workplace environment, lack of opportunities for advancement, and bad relationships with manager, supervisor, and or leadership. So these are all a really big deal. No wonder. I mean, if anyone's facing this kind of dynamic, this kind of environment in their work, no wonder that they're feeling burnt out or they want to tap out and go somewhere else for a while.
Yes. I also appreciate that you have the report in front of you, which is something that I should have.
I memorized all this.
Oh, that is amazing. Doggone it. To think that I haven't done that.
No, I do have it right here. And it's really interesting because on this podcast in the past, I've had burnout experts. Jim Young came on and Nea Sangwan came on, and these are people who are burnout experts, and they're awesome. And it's really easy to get stuck in the conversation. It's like, oh, everybody's all burned out. Oh, poor us. What are the definitions of burnout? But the point here is like, what's contributing to it? And then, of course, what everyone wants to think is, how can we help? How can we make it better? What can we do to take down some of these pressures on people? So what have you learned about that side of things?
So, I mean, I think it's interesting. I'm going to, particularly as we're talking about burnout and being an entrepreneur, I actually have a personal story, which is that I was actually diagnosed with burnout last year from like a mental health professional. So when we're talking about burnout, like I now have a very personal relationship to it, but also a sort of feel very strongly about talking about it as like, oh, this is a mental health thing. This is not like it can result in like impacting your mental health negatively. So, what have I learned? One of the things I've learned about is rest and the importance of rest. But not just placing that on the individual to say like, oh no, you need more rest, everybody needs to rest more, but also what can organizations do to actually place like rest into their into like the culture.
Yeah.
And so and I'm sure the experts have talked about this, but it's like maybe we actually have 30 minutes between meetings.
Right. As opposed to 30 seconds.
Yes, maybe we say no one's going to respond to emails after 5 p.m. and that's actually an expectation. Maybe we I mean, I think there's also this idea of placing burnout in the context in which it kind of needs to be talked about, which to me is well-being. So as everyone is talking about, if you're an entrepreneur and you have a team, and I've been really thinking about this and writing a little bit about it, where although none of it is public, where I've been thinking about like, why aren't we talking about burnout in the healthcare, like in terms of picking our insurance? Like, why aren't we talking about like it as a mental health well-being issue and being in those circles as opposed to like work-life balance? Because I feel like something can be done if we say this is a health issue, as opposed to this is like work-life balance, because work-life balance is it's like a little, it's an amoeba to me.
Well, Ericka, one of the things that I don't believe is in this particular report, but is in some other work of yours, is essentially the recommendation that to help with burnout, companies should explore shutting down once or twice a year as a whole company and taking time off and doing this outside of the normal holidays, right? We know that people are going to be off on Christmas or 4th of July or Thanksgiving or what have you, but really building that into the company to say, hey, we're just going to shut down and take some time off. And you do see companies doing that now. You do see companies doing rest weeks in the summertime, and they do 4-day weeks in the summer sometimes, and that sort of thing. So we are seeing that. What impact is that likely to have?
I mean, I think that is so one, I think it's really a good way of role modeling that that rest is important to the organization. It's like it's prioritizing it. I think it's also, and I write it, we put this in the report, like especially for people of color who may feel like, oh my gosh, I have to like be at the top of my game at all times. I cannot rest because I'm the only one of whatever. It allows me to, if I use myself as an example, to say like, okay, everyone is resting, right? Like everyone is expected to do this, so now I can do it.
It's the permission structure for taking care of yourself.
It is, and it's and it I think there's a lot more wrapped into it, which is like if everyone is resting, then there's like not a competition to see who can get it done the fastest, the best, be the most responsive. Like all of that is sort of like titrated, like it's tied down. It calms down.
Can I just ask what was going on for you when you got diagnosed with burnout?
Yeah. So, you build the thing that you never had. I released a report. I mean, that's a very short comical answer. But the thing is that behind doing the Black Women Thriving report, we were doing that initiative, which, we so beautifully talked about at the beginning and how big of an initiative that was. I was doing that with a full client load.
Okay.
And so that was not the best idea. And I think I was also pushing like the time period in which we had to get it done. So essentially from when we put the survey tool out to when we published it was maybe 12 months. That's fast.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of like everything that we did around it. So yeah, I mean, I think it was, yeah, having a full client load and putting out a national report and everything around it. I don't regret that. But people often ask me, what I do regret is that I wish I had been able to like see a little bit outside of myself to go like, okay, things are not going well here.
Yeah, and had a little bit of an early warning sign.
Actually listen to the early warning signs because I think they were there. They were there.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't listen to them. And, the body has a way of making you listen when it really, really, really wants to.
Yes, and yes, it does indeed. Yes, indeed. Now, Ericka, the podcast, the audience of this podcast is mostly entrepreneurs, people who are starting their own companies across all sorts of different industries, verticals, and parts of the world. But many are committed to the concepts of DEI, and they want to bring this into their company, especially at an early stage. They would just want to have it be a part of their DNA of their startups. What are the best ways to do this? How can entrepreneurs who want to support bring this into their companies and go beyond sort of the traditional training or policies?
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think the first thing that I have worked with clients to do, and I've worked with startups, is actually to contextualize what does DEI mean to them. So, I mean, there are definitions of DEI, and you should have a shared language about those. But I think what I'm saying is like, if we understand that diversity means we want different perspectives, lived experiences, and identities, right? What does that mean in the context of the business that, whatever industry that I'm in? What does that mean to us? And from that, once you sort of have those operational definitions, I think the strategies and the knowledge sort of that you need flows from that. I think the what I have seen that has not worked is to say, yes, we would like to have that, and if we do unconscious bias training, that will mean that we will have learned everything, and that is not true. My 14 years of experience will tell you that.
Yeah, I've heard quite a lot about those training programs not being as effective as we want, to put it one way, or certainly not changing any behaviors. Is that sort of the default mode? Is that what people jump to, is we're going to go do unconscious bias training?
I think people jump to yes. I think companies jump to, we need to train people first, as opposed to understanding that doing DEI work really is about affecting the policies, the practices, the procedures, and the behaviors of folks. People want to jump to the behaviors. Well, if people just either don't do this or they do this, then our culture will be, will be diverse and inclusive and equitable. When in fact, I mean, to speak, as an entrepreneur, I think you have to think about this should become like one of the pillars of your business. And in doing so, like, you want to embed it across operations, across, how you hire, across how you're doing performance reviews, across how you pick vendors.
So speaking of that, what are some of the metrics or the KPIs that are going to be helpful to us if we're trying to figure out is this working? Is this effective? Are we having an impact? What are those types of indicators that we're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, I think so I go back to which of those are you really trying to impact? So I'm very specific when I talk about diversity and what are the strategies for diversity, what are the strategies for inclusion, what are the strategies for equity. Therefore, the KPIs for diversity would be representation. Like, do we have X?
And is the goal in that? So educate me here. Is the goal in that we want our company to look like our town or our state? We want our company to look like the country. What is the right represent? If we look at representation, what are we usually gauging on?
I mean, I think there's a couple of things. So I think it kind of depends on where you do your work. If you are local, I would say you want it to reflect the community. And you also want it to just be representative of the values that you have. With sort of national organizations, it's like, I think you often also need to think about like, who are the clients that you want? If you are like a client serving, and I mean like, yeah. Anyways, people like me are going to look and see, do you have anyone who looks like me on your staff? And not only am I going to see if you have someone who looks like me, I'm going to see what their job title is, which is very elitist, but actually important. Because if you say, we're really diverse, and what I see is everyone who is a person of color is sitting at the administrative level, I'm going, no, that's not good enough. So I think that, the KPIs really, like, I try to work with my clients to say, which one are we focusing on? So inclusion is a different set of KPIs. Equity is a whole different set. Inclusion is like, we want people to feel included. That's organizational culture.
Okay.
A lot of those would be around, do people feel valued? Do people feel like they can speak up? Do people feel like when they go to their manager, that their manager gives them, good feedback and is listening? A lot of actually what we were talking about in terms of burnout and thriving, I just put that together. And equity is around, when we talk about like pay equity, like what are folks getting paid? Are people receiving, this is the social justice part of me, like, are folks receiving a livable wage? Those folks who are at the bottom, that not the bottom, but in the lower rungs of the organization, like that's about like equity and thinking about how are we impacting those societal ills by how we run our businesses.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and is belonging something we're able to track there too?
I mean, I include belonging actually as a part of inclusion. Like, okay. I don't sort of take belonging and like, even though we talk about belonging as its own thing in the report, I view belonging as a part of inclusion. Like, do people feel included? Do they feel like they belong? Yes, and I think you can track that. I think that what we have to do around that is really around leadership skills, management skills, organizational culture, and how we are purposefully, consciously building those.
And on that, if you're in a position of leadership, or frankly, if you're just coming from someone who has certain privileges and power out there, and we want to be more than just an ally, we want to be more than just performative, what are the things that we can do on a day-to-day basis to help?
So, I think that it is actually really important for folks to divest from the idea that they will do this correctly all the time. Mm-hmm. And I say that as the first thing because I think if we walk into any type of being beyond an ally, and we think like, I have got to do it perfectly, and if I mess up, I will never attempt it again. then we are setting ourselves up to fail and to feel a tremendous amount of like punitiveness about this work. So I think one is like a mindset. I think other things are being willing to actually initiate hard conversations.
What kind of hard conversations? What do you mean?
I mean, I think it depends on what it is that we're talking about. If we're talking about race, I often say to white folks have to talk to other white folks about race. I, the Black woman, should actually not have to bring up race in a conversation where racism is occurring. It should not, all eyes should not turn to me to go like, is this in fact racist? And can we talk about that? I mean, I do it as a profession, but yes, so I think it is being willing to initiate and be in those types of conversations where you share identities, but you want to point out like where can we change? And I think there's also so I think that's one thing. I think that there's also being willing in hierarchical relationships, so in organizations, senior leadership, or like the owner, right, to actually recognize that you come with power.
In many ways, I was sort of asking that question about myself, right? I mean, in preparing for this conversation today, I read that whole Black Women Thriving report, and I sat there thinking, I have no idea what it's like to be a Black woman in a professional environment. I don't know what life is like. I don't know what these things are that they're going through. I wish I had a way to be more open with my vocabulary. I wish I had a way to be more empathetic. I wish I had a better way to communicate all this stuff so that I can learn, so that I can, be a more active participant in the discussion. That's really what I was kind of getting at, because I sat there and I said, I can see these statistics, but I don't really know how it feels. I don't really understand what it's like on a day-to-day basis. And of course, as a white man, I have all these other perspectives on the world. I have all these different privileges that are afforded to me. And so I'm trying to figure out, what is it that I can do, and how can I encourage people like me to have these types of conversations that are really helpful and powerful?
There's a part of me that's like, I understand that a lot of times, and I hope that people have gotten out of this habit, which is running up to like a Black woman and being like, I read XYZ. Is this true for you? This is one of the reasons that we did this report and we did this work, is to say like, here's the statistics. They're valid, accept them as true. Number one. Number two, figure out if you do have, a staff and you're in your company and there are Black women, think about which of these that you haven't done, and maybe begin to think about what you can do to help Black women and everyone else thrive in the company. So I think that there is kind of this accepting of the fact that, just as you said, like, hey, I want to try and work on this. Say, okay, here's how I've read the report. What do I do? I'm like, do these things. Like, that's why we wrote a whole recommendation section that, I really do come from like, here's how we're going to operationalize this, which I know is like wonky consultant speak, but is really like, those recommendations are meant to be like, do this, do the piece where it's like, think about taking a week off. Think about taking 4 days off, 3 days. Like, what can you give to folks that will help them? How are you, one of the pieces we talk about is like mentoring, and I know that a lot of places are like, we don't have enough folks to mentor people. And I said, start a peer mentoring program. How about that? So that you don't, like, I'm trying to, in a very selfish way, I'm trying to take away objections.
Sure.
By trying to be like, okay, I know you can't do that because you told me, 100 of you have told me you can't do that. Try this. Because it's, just like with any type of change, it's like, let's take some incremental steps as opposed to saying we can't take any steps. I hope that was helpful to you.
No, it is helpful. It is helpful because I live in Colorado. Colorado is a very white state, right? Relatively speaking. And so a lot of people here are well-meaning, but we don't always know where to start, or we don't have the opportunity to do so, and it doesn't always present itself. One question I wanted to ask you before we wrap up is, I know that DEI has been under a lot of strain lately. There's been a lot of people saying, is it worth it? And there's been a lot of cutbacks in the investments that companies are making. Are DEI programs that economically sensitive? Like, is this something that we only do during boom times? And then when people need to make cuts to budget, is it one of the first things to go? And thinking about it that way, like, is it possible that this is actually a better time to be investing in these programs when things aren't going as well, when everything isn't growing, when we're maybe in more of a recession or economic uncertainty mode? How do you think about that?
So, yes, the answer is yes to all of the things that you said. DEI is considered this and this sort of thing that's on the side here, and like, let's get rid of it because people still don't necessarily see the benefits of it, and they don't. Even though I can say to them, and folks who are in my profession say, like, this takes time. If I talk about 2020, the folks who have cut DEI in the last 3 years are like, well, we did 3 years. No big changes have happened. It's time to like slice and dice it because it's like profits.
Right.
So definitely on the chopping block. I think added to that, sort of the really big social pushback on it. Absolutely has had an impact. But and to answer your question, it's like, the thing is that people who are Black, Indigenous, people of color, trans, gay, we're not going away in the workplace. So yes, it's all still a good time to do it. Like, to me, in my brain, it's like this, it doesn't make sense not to be doing this. And this really isn't from a place of like, oh, this is my business. It's more like, look at who's in your workplace. Why would you not try and make it a place that people want to work in?
Oh, for sure. I mean, not only are these groups of people not going away, they tend to be getting even bigger as a percentage of the workforce.
Yes.
And so that's really important. On top of that, stressors are actually way up right now.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So in economic downturns, everyone's stress goes up. So it's an even better time to make sure that we have these kind of bumpers in place, if you will, or these types of programs.
Right. Exactly. Yes. So this is actually a very good time to be either maintaining or increasing, but I'll take maintaining. I'm going to be honest, like maintaining your investment in this work. And I mean that both financially, but also like other resources. This is, we need to maintain it.
Great. Thank you. Ericka, any last thoughts on how entrepreneurs can think about DEI differently in 2024 and beyond?
Really understand that you are not just doing this for your own current workplace, but those for millennials and Gen Z, because they are here with us, and their expectations are pretty high. And we need to continue to, like, the workplace is going to evolve anyways. So we may as well like try and be helping to lead and to usher it in.
We might as well be keeping up with the evolution instead of resisting it.
Exactly. So.
Yeah, well, super. Hey, Ericka, thank you so much for joining us. Ericka Hines, appreciate you being here to give us this tremendous masterclass on how to be thinking about DEI as a competitive advantage in business. I really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you so much.